Right now, you're warm. You didn't even notice it. Somewhere behind a wall, heat is running on its own. A coat hangs by your door and you didn't have to kill anything to make it. There's food in your kitchen that will still be waiting for you tomorrow, no matter how hard the wind blows outside. Now take it all away. Leave nothing but bare skin and a night so cold it could kill you in your sleep before you ever opened your eyes. For your ancestors, that wasn't a horror story. That was just Tuesday. And somehow, every single one of them lived long enough to matter. Think about what that means. For you to be sitting here right now, breathing, listening to this, every ancestor in your line survived long enough to pass life forward. Not one link in that chain broke before the next generation began. Thousands of winters and the line never snapped. You're not only their descendant, you are the proof that they won. But how? How does a soft, hairless animal that grew up under the African sun live through the deadliest cold this planet has ever thrown at a human being? They had no fur, no claws, no way to sleep the season off like a bear. On paper, they should have been first to die when the ice came. And yet they didn't. The story of how they pulled it off is one of the most underrated survival stories we have, and almost nobody knows how close we came to losing it. Let's be honest about what they were facing, because the word winter makes it sound small. A cold afternoon, a campfire, something cozy. It was nothing like that. The last ice age hit its worst point around 26,000 to 19,000 years ago. Huge sheets of ice covered much of northern Europe and North America, while brutal cold reshaped vast stretches of Eurasia. The land was flat, frozen, and wide open, with nothing to break the wind. Trees were scarce. Food simply disappeared for months at a stretch, and the human body isn't built for any of it. We come from warm places, and our bodies still behave like it. No thick fur, no fat layer like a seal. We can't drop our heartbeat and sleep through the cold like a bear. Strip a person down in real cold and they have hours, not days. The body shuts down, and that's the end. Meanwhile, everything around them was built for that world. Mammoths carried fur and fat. Cave bears could hibernate. Reindeer could walk somewhere warmer. Humans had none of those gifts. Wrong body, wrong place, worst possible moment to be alive. But there was one thing they had that none of those animals did. A brain that could plan ahead and hands that could build the things their bodies were missing. As it turned out, that was just barely enough. There was never one single trick that saved them. It was a whole stack of them, each one solving a problem that would otherwise have ended the line right there. Here's how they actually made it to spring. It begins with fire. Nothing else works without it. Humans had been working with fire for an incredibly long time, on the order of hundreds of thousands of years. By the Ice Age, fire wasn't a pleasant extra. It was the whole foundation of staying alive, and people had become very good at it. When researchers dug up Ice Age hearths, they didn't find clumsy, scattered fires. They found carefully built fireplaces, engineered to burn hot and steady. When wood ran out on the open plains, people burned fat and bone instead. Fire gave them heat, cooked their food, hardened their tools, and added precious hours of light in a world where the sun barely climbed over the horizon. One fire was the difference between making it to morning and not. But fire has a flaw. You can't take it with you, step away from the flames, and the cold is instantly back on your skin. So humans did something no other animal on Earth could do. They took the warmth off of other animals and wore it themselves. At first it was crude. Raw skins thrown over the shoulders, and people had been stripping fur from animals for an astonishingly long time, leaving cut marks on the bones right where you'd slice to peel a hide off clean. Those early hides became wind-breaking winter cloaks, but a loose skin leaks heat through every gap, and that alone was never enough for a true ice age. The fix arrived around 30,000 years ago, and it's so small it almost sounds like a joke. The sewing needle, a thin sliver of bone or ivory with a tiny hole drilled through one end. One researcher called it possibly the most important invention in all of human history, and honestly, he has a point. The needle meant you could sew, and a draped skin and a fitted, sealed garment are two completely different worlds. Closed seams, real layers, sleeves that tightened at the wrist, a coat that fit the body and trapped its heat instead of letting it pour out the sides. The needle is the quiet tool that turned a cold animal into a warm one. They didn't stop at fur. Softer hides became mittens and waterproof boots. And before stepping out into the wind, hunters would smear animal fat across their faces and necks. It sealed the skin, held in heat, and stopped the wind from stealing warmth straight off the body. Simple, a little disgusting, and it worked. Out on the open snow was another danger most people never think about: snow blindness. Sunlight bouncing off endless white can burn your eyes and blind you for days, and a blind hunter in the Ice Age was a dead one, so they carved narrow slits into bone or wood and tied them across their eyes. The thin gaps cut the glare to almost nothing. The first pair of sunglasses on Earth made of bone. Now picture where they lived. Everyone imagines cavemen deep inside some dark cave, but the reality is more impressive. Many built their own homes from scratch. Out on the frozen plains of what is now Ukraine and Russia, there were no caves and barely any wood, so they used the one thing scattered everywhere: mammoth bones. Archaeologists found roundhouses built almost entirely from mammoth bones and tusks, skulls and leg bones anchored into the ground as a foundation, ribs and curving tusks arched up to form the frame. Hundreds of bones in a single house. They were sunk partway into the earth and packed with hides, moss, and soil, which held the heat well enough to keep a whole family alive through the dark months. Some of these homes are around 18,000 years old, built in the coldest stretch of the Ice Age, and the sites were returned to again and again across generations. People built their shelter out of the bodies of giants, and the design was clever in ways you would never guess. Many winter homes use a cold trap entrance with the doorway dug lower than the sleeping area. Cold air is heavy, so it sank into the low entrance and pooled there, while the warm air rose to where the family actually slept. They worked that out tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote down a word about how heat behaves. They use snow too, which sounds backwards until you felt it. Snow is a superb insulator. Bank thick walls of it around a shelter and the inside holds far warmer than the killing air outside. Where you built mattered just as much. People sheltered among trees had it far easier than those in the open because a stand of trees kills a huge amount of wind. Every gap and draft got stuffed with moss, mud, and sticky pine pitch, sealing the home tight against the night. Staying warm keeps you alive tonight. But winter has a second, slower killer: hunger. For months on end, there was almost nothing left to gather and very little left to hunt. So they became masters at saving food long before they needed it. When they brought down a big animal, they didn't just eat it, they preserved it. The cold itself did half the work, freezing meat solid after a hunt. They smoked it, dried it into tough strips that lasted, and stored it in pits dug into the frozen ground where the earth acted as a cellar. There's even evidence they sank meat into cold ponds to keep it fresh, a natural fridge that never lost power in a storm, and they wasted almost nothing. Every part of an animal was used, every calorie squeezed from a carcass. Hard to picture in a world where we throw away half of what we buy. The hunting was organized and patient. In some places, hunters used fire and teamwork to drive whole herds into natural traps, returning to the same spot over thousands of years. Kill big, dry the meat, store it deep, ration it against the cold. That single plan, more than anything, is why they reached spring at all. And here's the part that's easy to miss. These people expected winter. Their entire year was built around bracing for it. We are the ones who get caught off guard. We assume the heat will always come back on and act shocked when a storm proves us wrong. They were never shocked. A huge portion of their lives was preparation. And crucially, they used each other. Far more people lived under one roof than any of us would tolerate today in far less space, and that was on purpose. Body heat is a real, measurable source of warmth when you pack enough people close together. The person with space to themselves wasn't lucky. They were cold and exposed. It was usually the ones who lived alone, especially the old, who slipped away first in a brutal cold snap with no one beside them to share warmth. Survival wasn't a solo act, it was a pile of bodies keeping each other above the line between living and freezing. But it would be a lie to pretend this world was gentle. Life on the edge of the ice was brutally hard, and when the food ran out and the cold refused to break, people were sometimes pushed past anything we'd want to imagine. There is evidence that in the very worst moments, when there was nothing left, some groups turned to the only food source remaining: each other. It's grim and it's hard to sit with, but it belongs in the honest picture. Reaching spring sometimes cost far more than effort and cleverness. Sometimes it cost a piece of who they were. That is how thin the margin truly was. The gap between an ordinary life and an unthinkable choice was often just a few weeks of failed hunting and a sky that refused to warm. Much later, in farming societies, people would bring animals under the same roof for warmth, letting the heat rising off livestock warm the family sleeping above. You essentially lived on top of your own furnace, and the furnace breathed and chewed and kept you alive. But the Ice Age hunters came long before any of that. They had no barns, no herds, no livestock to lean on. They had to solve the same problem with nothing but their own bodies, their fire, and each other. And in the most extreme cold on Earth, At the far southern tip of South America, there were people who survived freezing conditions wearing almost nothing at all. Their bodies had adapted to make more heat from the inside, and they rested in a tight crouch that pulled their limbs in close and gave the cold less of them to steal. Their answer to winter wasn't a thicker coat, it was their own body turned up to maximum. For hundreds of thousands of years, reaching spring was never a guarantee. Every winter was a test you could fail, and failing meant you simply didn't wake up. And here's the question that stays with me. Why would a world this beautiful also be this cruel? But maybe that's the wrong way to see it. Maybe the cold was never punishment at all. Maybe it was the one thing that forced us to become clever, to band together, to build, to protect the ones who couldn't make it alone. A soft animal in a warm world stays soft forever. Winter refused to let us stay that way. We are who we are because something tried to break us every year, and every year we answered. In a sliver of time, almost nothing on this timeline, we went from stacking mammoth bones into a shelter to pressing a single button for heat. The deadliest enemy our ancestors ever faced, the thing that hunted every one of them through every dark night, is now a small inconvenience we grumble about on the walk to a warm car. So the next time the cold bites your face and you step inside and forget about it a second later, stop for just one moment. You come from an unbroken line of people who stared into that same darkness, refused to lie down in it, and clawed their way back to the light every single time. You are what their survival was for, and every warm night you'll ever take for granted was paid for, in full, by someone who never once got to feel it themselves.